I was diagnosed with stage 4 non-small cell lung cancer with the driving mutation of EGFR Exon-19 at 43 years old in December of 2019. So I've been a stay-at-home mom for 19 years now, and my oldest is 19 and heads to college in just about, a month and a half. And then I also have a daughter who's going to be a senior in high school that's 17 and a half, and then I have a son who is almost 14, and he will be in 8th grade this coming school year. In September, I would say mid-September of 2019, I started with a cough, and it was just a dry, kind of persistent cough. And I really didn't think anything about it because I watched my sister's kids, who at the time were babies, 2 days a week, and they were always, had some kind of little germ. But after about 2 weeks, I went to my primary care physician, and I was there simply because I had a cough that would not go away. And she first diagnosed me with what she called post-viral cough, meaning I got some kind of virus and this was just the cough that was hanging around. So she put me on a steroid and sent me on my way. And I would say in, a week or so, definitely with the steroids, I was feeling better. But then a few weeks later, the cough was back. And not only was the cough back, but I was also having shortness of breath. I was a distance runner for many years, and I ran with a running group. And the way we started this group was we decided this was going to be for fun. So we were going to talk the entire time we ran. And we literally would run like 8.5-minute miles talking the entire time. Now I can't imagine. But I started noticing that I couldn't keep up. Like I could keep up my pace, but I couldn't keep up the conversation without feeling winded. So I went back to the doctor and I saw a different doctor, and I said, I just feel like a heaviness in my chest, and especially when I'm running. And he told me that I had exercise-induced asthma. And I was like, I don't know about that. Like, I feel like I know my body and I've never had this issue before. So why now almost all of a sudden is this an issue? So I saw an allergist and he was like, no asthma. So then I went back to the same doctor in that practice, which would not be my first choice, but that's who was available. And I said, I'm feeling worse. Now I'm feeling really tired. I'm still coughing. I have a heaviness in my chest, and I feel as if I may have pneumonia. I've had this before. Can I have a chest x-ray? And he was like, oh, you don't need that. He's like, I listened to your breathing and you sound like you're breathing fine. And I said, well, can you just please do this is just making me feel better. And he said, well, I'll do it, but I'm going to call you in 45 minutes and tell you it's negative for pneumonia. And, this is just, either allergies or asthma. I said, okay. Well, 45 minutes later, he called me. He said, you know what? He's like, I can't believe I'm admitting this, but you have right consolidation in your lung. He's like, meaning you have pneumonia. So he put me on a Z-Pak and he put me on a steroid. And halfway through this Z-Pak, I was at my daughter's swim meet. She swam competitively. And I've been sitting in that pool, like Coliseum thing, with a nasty chlorine all day. And I just felt worse and worse and worse. And that night when we got back home, I started coughing up blood. And I was like, this isn't right. On Monday morning, I called back and I spoke to him and I said, this is what's going on now. And he's like, well, I think you just need a stronger antibiotic. So he put me on a stronger antibiotic and more steroids. And every time I was on the steroids, I felt better-ish, but I still was like, this is not right. And so on it's like November, called 15th-ish, I went to the doctor again, and I said, can you please do another x-ray? Clearly this pneumonia is not going away. So they did, and they were like, oh, sure shows this right lung consolidation. So they admitted me to the hospital for 4 days to be on round-the-clock IV infusion, high-powered antibiotics, and steroids. So by the time I left that visit, that hospital stay, I did feel pretty good because I'd been on steroids through IV for 4 weeks. While I was there, the pulmonologist came in and he said, well, I'm going to do a bronchoscopy. And I was like, well, can you explain what that is? And he's like, well, that's where we're going to go in through your nose, down through your throat into your lung, and I'm just going to take a look around with a camera, and I'm going to flush it with saline. And if I see any masses or nodules, we'll go ahead and biopsy those. And I was like, what are you talking about? I'm here for pneumonia. So he did it, and he came out and he said, everything looks great. There is consolidation in your lung. It's just residual pneumonia. Didn't see anything unusual. And this pneumonia can hang around for several weeks. Couldn't hardly walk up the steps without like having to sit down because I couldn't breathe. I was having right rib pain and right shoulder pain. I was coughing. I had lost weight. I looked awful. And I called the doctor's office, and they were like, we don't have any appointments. So I drove myself to the doctor's office and was standing in the doctor's office crying at the ladies at the front desk. I was like, there's something seriously wrong with me. I need someone to see me. I need somebody to listen to me. And they kind of blew me off. And I said, I'm not leaving here until somebody sees me. So they sent the nurse practitioner out. And I think that was more for like a mental wellness check, because I think they thought I was losing it. And she sat down with me and she listened to everything that I had been through and experiencing. I had written down everything in dates and times. And she's like, there's something not right about this. And you know your body. And she said, I'm going to send you to the hospital for an outpatient CT scan. And I had a CT scan when I was in the hospital in November with this pneumonia. And I said, okay. So I went and had that done, and I got home, and that night around 6 o'clock, I got a phone call from the doctor, who was my original primary care physician that I saw back in September. And she kept saying, are you having any back pain? And I said, no, and are you doing this? And are you doing that? And I'm like, no, it's this cough. It's the heaviness in my chest. It's the shortness of breath. She said, well, there's some things that are on your CT that are a little concerning. She's like, I'm not really that worried, but we need you to go on to the emergency room to be admitted so we can do some further testing. We went into the emergency room, and after waiting for a while, my husband to get there in time, we go back to see the doctor, and the doctor in the ER says to me, well, have you seen your CT results? And this is before things dropped in real time onto my chart. And I said, well, no. And he's like, literally turned the computer screen towards me. And he said, can you read this right here? This is what we're concerned about. And it said lytic lesions present on T4 and T5, highly concerning for metastatic cancer. So I read that to my husband and my mom, and I looked at that doctor, and I said, that means cancer that's spread from where it started. And he goes, yes, ma'am, you're correct. And I said, I don't understand. What is going on? And he said, well, I don't know, but we're going to admit you and figure out where this cancer is coming from. So they admitted me to the hospital, and they called a pulmonologist in because they did know that I had fluid on my right lung, but they said that could be a sign of breast cancer or ovarian cancer. And that's kind of what they thought, because given my age and my health and whatever, and I had never smoked. So the hospitalist came in, and he called a pulmonologist to do a thoracentesis to remove some of that fluid off my lung to test it for malignancy. Within 24 hours, that came back as malignant, but did not indicate where it was coming from. So they sent an oncologist over, and he opted to do a bone biopsy from my spine because it was the easiest place to reach. So the bone biopsy came back a day or so later, and it said that it was lung cancer, non-small cell lung cancer, stage 4. Do you want to guess how many times I went to the doctor before I was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer as a never smoker at 43 years old? Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, not kidding, 5. Oh, let's not forget that I was also in the hospital for antibiotic-resistant pneumonia for 4 days. Back to the doctor 6, back to the doctor 7. You could have knocked us, my mom and my dad and I, or my mom and my husband and I, over with a feather, because none of us even knew that you could get lung cancer without smoking. That oncologist told me I had 6 to 12 months to live, and that I needed to get my affairs in order. And I was 43 with small kids. So my husband basically told him to leave the room and never come back, and that was unacceptable, and to send a different oncologist. The second oncologist that came in was actually, randomly enough, one of my husband's fraternity brothers, and younger. And he said, well, he's like, I'm not going to say 6 to 12 months yet because you've never smoked and you're healthy. I think that you might have a biomarker or a gene that is driving this lung cancer. He said, so I think we need to do biomarker testing, which was the first we'd ever heard of it. And we were like, sure, sign us up. We learned that I had tested positive for the EGFR Exon-19 deletion mutation. So then I went to see the local oncologist on the 30th, and I was prescribed Tagrisso, which is a targeted therapy or a TKI for my genetic marker. And he actually had a sample, which he says he never does, but he did. So I was able to start Tagrisso on the 30th December. Since then, I have had 4 thoracentesis done to drain fluid when I was first on treatment. I switched my primary care to Vanderbilt University because it's a comprehensive care center. I have had numerous PET scans and CTs of my chest and abdomen every 3 months. About a year into my diagnosis, they felt like Tagrisso had done its job really, really well, and all of my bone metastases were sclerotic, meaning healing, and lucky, unlucky, the only place my cancer had spread was to my spine and pelvis. So it wasn't in my brain, it wasn't in my liver or any other organs. So I had 1 primary tumor in my right middle lobe, and then I had about 13 bone mets in my spine and pelvis. So about a year into my treatment, all of those bone mets were sclerotic, and my primary tumor had shrunk by 70%. So we said, we want to be aggressive. What else can we do? So they introduced us to a radiation oncologist. And at the end of November of 21, beginning of December, I had 8 sessions of SBRT radiation, which is really strong and high-powered and precise. So my primary tumor in my right lung. And I have remained what they consider stable since then, with no progression in my lungs or any of the sites where I had metastasis. So I take Tagrisso every day, and I'm just staying on that protocol until I progress. And it's not a matter of if I will progress, it's a matter of when. The average patient can take the Tagrisso for 2 to 3 years with response. I've been on it 4.5 years, still getting response. So I know I'm technically on, I guess, borrowed time on my TKI. And as for what would be next, there is no official next step. They would redo biomarker testing to make sure that I didn't develop any other mutations, to make sure I'm still just EGFR positive and not like ALK hasn't joined the club or it hasn't changed to small cell lung cancer. And then at that point, there would be talk of, do we radiate, depending on how many spots I progress in? Do we add oral carboplatin chemotherapy, not oral, I'm sorry, IV infusion chemotherapy to the oral targeted therapy? Do we add another targeted therapy? You know, what would we do at that point is unclear, because lung cancer is an ever-changing world right now. And I feel lucky that I was diagnosed when Tagrisso was FDA approved. I remember sitting there and I burst into tears, and I was like, this can't be happening. Like, metastatic cancer is what you die from. And I'm living now. And actually, the day that I was admitted to the ER, I ran that morning. Like, even though my breathing was so bad, I still ran 3 miles. So how can you tell me that I have metastatic cancer and I'm going to die when I'm still doing these things? And I remember just sitting there being like, and saying it out loud, crying and saying, my job is not done here. My job cannot be done here. I still have life to live. I still have kids to raise. And when I was admitted on the floor, I was still in this like state of shock. Like, that's what it is. It's trauma and it's shock. And I was saying these same things and crying. And this nurse practitioner that was trying to get me all situated, she's like broke into tears. She's like, I'm sorry I'm being so unprofessional. I have kids your age. I can understand what you're going through, and I have to leave the room. And then she came back and she said, I'm so proud of you for standing up to all these doctors, many of which were older than I was, And even the one that was so much younger than me that was just acted like I'm a woman and I don't know what I'm talking about. I guess in some ways it was so disappointing in the medical community that what if I were not educated? What if I wouldn't have stood up for myself? What if I didn't have the financial means or the insurance to keep going back? That's who my heart breaks for. And being dismissed has never been my style. I'm not a confrontational person, but when I'm passionate about something, whether it's a student who had a learning difference, whether it was a friend that was not being treated right, I will stand up for what I believe in. And I knew I deserved better care than what I was getting. And I knew that there was something wrong. I firmly believe that as a 40-year-old woman, I had lived life long enough and prioritized my health, my eating and my exercising, the not smoking, to know this is not right. No one else like me is experiencing this right now. So we're going to get to the bottom of it. And it's very easy to kind of put your head in the sand because you don't want to hear the real story. You don't want to get that diagnosis. But every time I talk to a new person who's been diagnosed with lung cancer, especially, but with anything, or has been going to the doctor, I'm like, you've got to be your own self-advocate. And if you don't feel like you can be, you need to find somebody who will be. So to me, a second opinion is not it's not a luxury. It's not a, maybe we should do this. It's a, you must do this. Part of that is probably because I am a researcher by nature. My husband is very well educated, and he actually was diagnosed with prostate cancer at 42, 18 months before I was diagnosed. And that had been a cancer that had been taking men in his family for years. So we definitely knew the importance of seeking a second opinion when he was diagnosed. It wasn't even really a conversation that we had. We just knew that's what we needed to do. So when it came to my diagnosis, and Todd is cancer-free now. He's been 6 years cancer-free, and he's great. But being stage 4, I always say to people, it's not a broken finger. It's not even a broken leg. Like, this is your life. And there are smart people everywhere, but there's always someone who is smarter. And as soon as I was diagnosed, my husband was emailing and calling people he knew in the medical field. He doesn't work in the medical field, and saying, where do we need to go? Where do we need to go? What's the best place? We don't care if it's international, just tell us and we're going. And so that's how we ended up at Vanderbilt. This is not a cancer that I'll never be in remission. I'll never be cured. It's a matter of when will I progress, not a matter of if. Statistically, if you look at lung cancer statistics as a whole, 5% of people are still living in 5 years. And from day one, I said, I'm going to be one of the 5%. Somebody's got to be one of them. I'm going to be one of them. Those statistics are so outdated and so skewed because this whole new population of younger lung cancer patients being diagnosed under 50 with these genetically driven mutations that have never smoked put us in a totally different ball game than these people who are typically diagnosed at average age of 65 and typically have a smoking history. And that's not to say that I'm any better or my lung cancer is more important. It's just different. You know, it's like comparing BRCA breast cancer with HER2 breast cancer. They're just two different types of cancer, and we have to treat them differently. Saying I'm a never smoker is not to isolate or make someone feel guilty for the choices they made at all, because no one deserves cancer. I don't care if they've smoked 1,000 cigarettes a day their entire life. No one deserves this, but it does put us in a different position for treatment because we did not put ourselves at a knowing risk by smoking. So smokers, non-smokers, 20 years old, 78 years old, male, female, I don't care what race or gender you identify as, everyone should have a second opinion on something this important. So I'm heading into the oncology office here in my hometown. He's not my primary oncologist, but he is my local oncologist, just to kind of keep tabs on things. And for the second time in a row when I've come to see him, if coming to the oncology office isn't stressful enough or anxiety-ridden enough, I've driven around for approximately 20 minutes trying to find a parking spot. This is a really cruddy hand to be dealt, 100%. But I could sit here and dwell on the fact that more than likely this will end my life earlier than it should. Or I can choose, and this has kind of been my thing, there's been a few things. One is I'm going to be one of the 5%. So I think I'm going to be able to check that box. The other thing was to live my best day, or live my best life one day at a time. That's always been my motto. Every day can be your best day. You just have to choose to be your best day. Some days are better than others, but and enjoy the simple things, like whether it's getting to go watch your child play a sport, or if it's simply having 45 minutes of time to yourself to read a book that you've been wanting to read. Every day can be your best day in some way. And then the third is, if I'm going to go through this yuck, I want to be able to help the people behind me. I had a good friend that kind of we were talking about this and just the whole path. And we both agreed that it's always good to have someone ahead of you that you can look to for what's coming down the road. It's always good to have someone who's walking the path next to you that understands what you're going through. And it's always good to have somebody who's behind you that you can help lead. I think my final message to people watching would be that statistics aren't always right. And, just because statistically Google says something does not mean that you're going to be that statistic. I also firmly believe in alternative modalities to help with the emotional and the mental and even the physical side effects. I see a Reiki therapist every 8 weeks. I go to therapeutic massage every other month. I listen to sound bangs. Now, maybe they're working, maybe they're not. Maybe some of the stuff is, my husband calls it voodoo medicine. Maybe it is really just in my head that it's working. But I would say if it's not going to hurt your treatment, interfere with your actual medication, and it makes you feel better and it helps you live a better life, that it's worth trying. Second opinions are priceless. And just really trying to honor each day as a new gift, because all of us in this world are terminal. No one is guaranteed to live forever. Some of us just learn that it's going to be sooner than others, or that it's in your face a reality. So if we can remember that and enjoy the small things and try not to sweat the big, the little things, we've taught our kids, there's the difference between a small problem and a big problem. A small problem is, they forgot to put, ketchup on your burger. That's a small problem. A big problem is cancer. A small problem is, being disappointed that you didn't get an A on a test and you got a B. That's a small problem. A big problem is cancer. So there's a lot of life lessons that come along with it. And I guess that's what I want people to take away with it. As many bad things that come with this, there are some very good things. That there's still, you find out there's really good people out there. You find new friends. You become an inspiration to people. Life is not over when they tell you you have a terminal diagnosis. It's really just beginning.